Hello once more. This is for our last discussion. It must be Thursday because I'm wearing my burnt orange Longhorn shirt. Um, this topic this week is, of course, the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. And I teach government in high school. I teach high school government. And I was mighty tempted to just be different and to cover the middle amendments that actually dealt with judiciary processes, because it's probably not as well known that our judicial system, as much criticism as we might give the Supreme Court, our judicial system is actually one of the smoother running operations in our government, and it's because of those rights that are in the middle of the Bill of Rights, so that individual rights don't get trampled on in the courtroom. That was a place for the British to. It was just one of the several places during colonial times that the British were able to exert their authority, and so there was concern about having individual rights protected in the courtroom. But I couldn't resist talking more specifically about the Second Amendment, of course, and then really it, there's a number of. I mean, it goes way back. It goes back 1,000 years, right, or more. The founding fathers were well aware. The implementation of the Second Amendment is grounded in their reverence for philosophy, particularly the 14th, 15th, 16th centuries philosophers, and Machiavelli being among them. The precedents that he set in his writings gave the leaders in Florence great power, and part of their power was stemmed from and part of the comfort that people felt during the Florentine era stemmed from their ability to own weapons. Aristotle, a classical philosopher, mentions how the farmers need to be armed because people needed to be able to protect their property. There's other incidences in English law, even going back to the 1100s, whereby in the feudals within the makeup of the feudal system, the king allowed the nobles to build up the knighthood and be able to protect their property. So and then by the time the Declaration of Independence came around, Jefferson made several pointed points regarding the over-influence of the British standing army, their over-presence in the American colonies, and how it was repressive to the American citizenry. And once the Constitutional Convention came around, the first one came around, Madison, big on philosophy and big on the 16th, 17th century philosophers, wanted to implement a strong central government, and didn't actually have very much interest in giving the states extra protection. George Mason, once everything was drafted, once the Constitution was drafted, George Mason stepped in and said, "Hey, buddy, we need to have a Bill of Rights," and he was fairly adamant about it. So, what Mason was able to do, and consequently, the language that was incorporated gave the power to the states to be able to provide a well-regulated militia. It shouldn't be infringed. That power shouldn't be infringed upon. Now, lots of modern scholars will try to say, well, the militia is an antiquated term, but nonetheless, it still means the same thing. It's an armed citizenry. I mean, it means the same today, at least to me. It means the same today as it did then. It's an armed citizenry. So the founding fathers were very aware of these philosophical positions, and incorporated that into the Second Amendment. Now, my last point is that in the context of the definition of a militia, and whether or not it applies to individuals, or scholars who think that it doesn't apply to individuals. Well, a militia is made up of what? It's made up of individuals, armed individuals. So it makes it very difficult to have a militia, unless we're talking about just drones. But it makes it difficult to have an armed militia without individuals who are armed. And I would certainly hope that someone who joins a militia in defense of our country or our state, in defense of a foreign invader or in a corrupt government, or corrupt or rogue government, or from internal insurrection within a state, a cadre of people who would choose not to follow the rule of law and impose their own will. I think from those three things, we need to protect ourselves, and I would certainly hope that people who, an armed citizenry, an armed Christian law-abiding citizenry, who would be interested in protecting us from any of those three items, I would certainly hope that they would know how to use a gun.